It was a quiet evening in downtown Los Angeles. The sky was turning orange and the streets were filled with people heading home, holding coffee cups, talking about their day. But in the middle of all that noise, a man sat alone on a broken bench near an old bookstore. His clothes were torn, his face carried years of pain, and his eyes looked like he had seen too much. No one noticed him. No one even looked at him, except one man who stopped, watched for a moment, and then quietly walked toward him. It was Keanu Reeves. Keanu had just finished a long day of filming. He still had his black jacket on, his hair a little messy, and his eyes tired. His driver waited by the car, but Keanu didn't move toward it. Instead, he walked to the bench where the homeless man sat, holding an old paper cup that barely had a few coins. People passing by stared. Some whispered, but Keanu didn't care. He sat down beside the man without saying a word. The man looked at him slowly. "You don't have to sit here, man," he said, his voice low and rough. Keanu smiled softly. "Maybe I do," he replied. There was silence for a moment. Only the sound of cars and footsteps filled the air. Keanu took out a sandwich from a brown bag he was carrying. He handed it to the man without a word. The man hesitated, then took it. "Thanks," he whispered. Keanu nodded. "It's okay. I was just thinking you might be hungry." The man looked at him again, this time longer. "You look familiar," he said. "Are you someone I should know?" Keanu laughed a little. "Nah, just a guy who likes sandwiches," he said quietly. The man smiled for the first time in a long time. His teeth were broken, but his eyes softened. "You talk different," he said. "People who walk by here, they don't talk to me. They look at me like I don't exist." Keanu leaned back, looking at the sunset. "You exist," he said. "Maybe people just forget how to see." For a few minutes, neither spoke. Keanu just listened to the sound of life moving around them. The man started to talk, slowly at first, then with a kind of quiet release. His name was James. He had once worked as a mechanic. He had a small family, a wife and a daughter. But after an accident, everything fell apart. Medical bills took everything. His wife left, his daughter moved to another state, and he ended up on the streets. As James spoke, his voice broke. He tried to hide it, but Keanu noticed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't give advice. He just listened, fully, quietly, like every word mattered. "You know what hurts the most," James said softly. "It's not the hunger. It's not the cold. It's when people look through you, like you're already gone." Keanu looked down, his hands clasped. "I understand that," he whispered. Loneliness can feel louder than hunger. For the next hour, they talked. Keanu asked questions, small ones, gentle ones, about James's life, his dreams, the places he missed. James talked about music, old cars, and how he used to play guitar for his daughter when she couldn't sleep. Keanu smiled. "You should play again someday," he said. "Music remembers things even when we forget." The driver came closer, worried. He whispered, "Sir, people are recording." Keanu shook his head. "Let them," he said. "They'll record what they want to see. I'm seeing what I need to." He turned back to James. "Do you stay here every night?" "Most nights," James said. "Sometimes I move to the alley near the church when it rains." Keanu reached into his pocket. James thought he was taking out money, but instead, he pulled out a small folded note. "Take this," he said. "There's a place 2 streets from here. Safe shelter, warm food. Tell them a friend sent you." James unfolded the note. It had a name and an address. No signature, no hint of fame, just kindness written simply. "You don't have to do this," James said. "I know," Keanu replied. "But sometimes we do things not because we have to, but because we should." Then Keanu stood up. He looked at the city lights and smiled faintly. "Maybe one day your daughter will hear you play again." James looked up, his eyes wet. "Maybe," he whispered. Keanu started walking back toward the car, but before getting in, he looked back. James was still sitting there, holding the note, staring at it like it was the first thing in years that had given him hope. And for a moment, Keanu saw something rare. Not fame, not gratitude, but peace. That night, no one knew what had happened. No reporter, no camera, no post on social media. It was just 2 men, one known by the world, one forgotten by it, sitting side by side, sharing silence. And maybe something deeper than words. Later, When Keanu went home, he sat by the window of his apartment, watching the city lights flicker. He thought about James, about the thousands of people like him. He thought about how fame gave him attention, but kindness gave him meaning. And he whispered to himself, "Sometimes the best things we do are the ones we never talk about." The next morning, the city woke up like nothing had changed. Cars filled the streets, people rushed to work, and life kept moving, fast and loud. But for one man, something had shifted quietly inside. James, the homeless man, woke up with the folded note still in his hand. It wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was a promise. For the first time in years, he felt like someone had seen him, really seen him. He walked toward the address Keanu had written. The morning light was soft, and he could smell coffee from nearby shops. He hadn't smelled something that warm in a long time. When he reached the shelter, a kind woman at the door greeted him. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" James handed her the note. She read it and smiled. "Ah," she said gently. "We've been expecting you." He froze for a moment. "Expecting me?" The woman nodded. "A man came by last night. Said someone named James might show up today. He left a donation and asked us to keep a bed ready." James didn't know what to say. He just nodded, trying to hide the tears in his eyes. He didn't have to do that," he whispered. The woman smiled again. "He said the same thing about you." Inside, James got a clean bed, a warm meal, and something he hadn't felt in years: safety. He ate slowly, as if afraid it would disappear. Every bite reminded him of the sandwich Keanu had given him the night before. But more than the food, it was the thought that someone cared enough to remember his name, and that changed everything. While James rested, Keanu was on his way to the studio for another shoot. The set was busy, full of lights and noise, people talking into headsets and cameras moving around. But Keanu's mind wasn't there. Between takes, he found himself thinking about the bench, the quiet talk, and James's broken smile. His assistant, Claire, noticed. "You okay, Keanu? You seem a little distant today." He nodded slowly. "Just thinking," he said. "About the film?" "No," he replied softly. "About something real." Claire didn't ask more. She had worked with him for years. She knew Keanu had a quiet side that rarely showed up in interviews or headlines. He did things no one knew about, helping crew members, visiting hospitals without cameras, paying for people's meals without leaving his name. And yet, even for him, that night had felt different, because it wasn't about charity. It was about connection. That evening, when filming ended, Keanu sat in his trailer, tired but thoughtful. He looked at his reflection in the small mirror and whispered, "How many more Jameses are out there?" He picked up his phone, opened a note, and started typing ideas. "Project Nightlight," he wrote at the top. His plan was simple: to create a small, quiet fund to support homeless shelters around the city. No publicity, no credit. Just help, silently. He wanted it to stay invisible, the way kindness should be. Meanwhile, at the shelter, James was sitting by the window, watching people come and go. For the first time, he started talking to others. An old veteran named Mark, a young girl who had run away from home, a mother with a newborn baby. He shared his food, told small stories, even fixed a broken chair with tools the staff had given him. The volunteers noticed his calmness. He wasn't bitter anymore, he was healing. That night, one of the volunteers gave him a guitar, old, scratched, missing a string, but still playable. "Someone donated it last week," she said. "Maybe it was meant for you." James held it carefully, his hands trembling. He hadn't played in years. He sat by his bed, tuned it as best he could, and started strumming a slow melody, the same one he used to play for his daughter. The sound was soft, but it filled the shelter like light. People stopped and listened. Some smiled, some cried quietly, and for a few minutes, the world outside didn't matter. A few days later, Keanu returned to the same area. He didn't tell his driver where they were going. He just said, "Take me to the old bookstore street." When he reached, the bench was empty. Only the faint mark of rain was left on the pavement. Keanu smiled a little. "Maybe he made it," he said under his breath. He walked into the bookstore and bought 2 novels, one for himself, one to donate to the shelter he had written about. When he arrived there, he saw James sitting by the window strumming the guitar. Keanu stopped at the door, hidden from sight, just listening. He didn't want James to see him. He just wanted to know he was okay. A volunteer noticed him. "Can I help you, sir?" she whispered. Keanu smiled. "No need," he said softly. "He's already helping me." He turned to leave, but as he reached the car, he looked back one last time. James was laughing with another man, his eyes bright again, and Keanu felt something inside him loosen. The quiet kind of peace that comes from knowing you did something right without needing anyone to know. Later that night, Keanu wrote in his journal, "Kindness isn't loud. It doesn't need lights or cameras. It just needs a moment. One small moment when you decide someone else's life matters as much as yours." And somewhere in that small corner of Los Angeles, a homeless man played his guitar, not knowing the stranger who had once sat beside him was still thinking about him, and that both of their lives had quietly changed forever, ending line. And that night, when the city slept, one man found hope, another found peace, and both carried a secret no headline would ever tell. The rain returned to Los Angeles that week. It fell slow and steady, washing the dust off the streets and turning the city lights into blurred reflections. The shelter roof drummed softly with the sound of raindrops. And inside, James sat by the window again, strumming his old guitar. His fingers were rough, his hands still shaky, but there was a calmness in the way he played. It was like he was piecing himself together, one chord at a time. He didn't know it, but that small shelter had begun to change too. The staff noticed that ever since James arrived, more people had started talking to each other instead of just eating in silence. A few of them had even started helping out, cleaning tables, folding blankets, or sharing their stories. One of the volunteers said quietly, "It feels lighter here now." And James, though he didn't realize it, had become a small source of that light. That evening, the woman who managed the shelter, Maria, walked up to him. "You've got a gift," she said. James laughed softly. "I used to play for my daughter. She'd fall asleep halfway through." "What happened to her?" Maria asked gently. "She's in Texas," he said. "She was 12 when I lost everything. I haven't seen her since." Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe you should try to find her again." James looked down. "After all these years? She probably forgot my voice." Outside the shelter, in another part of the city, Keanu sat quietly in a dim cafe. He was wearing a cap low over his eyes, a notebook open in front of him. He wasn't writing movie lines or interviews. He was writing about the shelter. Not for publicity, but as a way to keep the memory alive. His note read, "Sometimes the people we call broken are the ones holding the world together in ways we don't see." He took a sip of his coffee and smiled faintly. He had donated quietly again, this time to expand the shelter's small kitchen. But he made one rule. No one was allowed to mention his name. He wanted the act, not the credit. A few days later, Maria called James over. "James, I've got some news for you. We're expanding the kitchen. More people will be able to eat now." James grinned. "That's amazing. You'll help build the new tables, right?" "Of course," he said proudly. "I might be rusty, but I still remember how to handle wood." As he worked, he began to feel useful again, like the man he used to be before life had fallen apart. One afternoon, while sanding a wooden bench, he found something carved on the underside of one of the old tables. 3 small words. "Never stop playing." He froze. The handwriting was neat, faint, but it felt strangely familiar. He smiled without understanding why. "Sounds like something I'd say," he muttered. A week later, the shelter hosted a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just a dinner to thank the volunteers and celebrate the new kitchen. James sat near the back, playing his guitar softly. People clapped along, laughed, and for a night, everyone forgot their troubles. Meanwhile, Keanu was across town at a charity event for a film premiere. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, and he smiled politely as always. But in the middle of all that noise, he suddenly thought about the sound of rain against the shelter roof, the guitar, and James's trembling voice when he said, "You don't have to sit here, man." That memory stayed with him like a heartbeat. After the event, while his co-stars went to an after-party, Keanu quietly excused himself. His driver asked, "Home, sir?" Keanu shook his head. "No, just drive." They passed through empty streets, rain tapping the car windows. After a few minutes, Keanu spoke softly. "Pull over here." They had stopped near the same bookstore street again. The bench was gone, replaced by a newer one, maybe one James himself had built. Keanu smiled. He sat there for a few minutes in the rain, no umbrella, just letting the water hit his face. For him, it wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. Gratitude that he had been reminded that kindness, even the smallest kind, can echo farther than you ever imagine. The next morning, something unexpected happened. James was cleaning near the shelter entrance when a delivery truck stopped outside. The driver handed Maria a package. "This came for you," he said. Maria opened it. Inside were several boxes, new blankets, books, and a note. It said, "For everyone who still believes in tomorrow." No name. No logo. Just that line. James looked at it for a long time. Somehow, deep inside, he knew who it was from. He didn't need proof. He smiled to himself. "He's still out there," he whispered. That night, as everyone went to sleep, James sat by the window again with his guitar. He started writing a small song, simple, raw, and full of feeling. It began with the words, "One man stopped when no one would." One word changed the silence. When he played it, Maria walked over quietly. "That's beautiful," she said. "It's not finished," he replied. "It's a thank you. But I don't know how to send it to him." "Maybe you don't have to," she said. "Maybe he already hears it." And somewhere across the city, Keanu sat by his own window looking out at the same rain. He couldn't explain why, but he suddenly smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. Maybe he couldn't hear the words, but somehow he felt them. Both men in different worlds, but connected by one silent moment of kindness, carried each other's strength without ever meeting again. Yet in their own ways, both had started to heal, one through music, the other through compassion. The days began to stretch into weeks. The air grew warmer, the shelter busier. What had once been a place of quiet survival was now full of small laughter, morning chatter, and the faint sound of music from James's guitar. Every evening, after the meals were done and the lights dimmed, people gathered around him. His songs weren't perfect. His voice cracked sometimes, but every note carried truth, the kind that reaches the heart without asking for permission. Maria once said to him, "You've given this place a heartbeat." James smiled shyly. "Nah, I just play a few notes." But she shook her head. "You play more than music. You play hope." That night, James sat outside the shelter under a soft yellow streetlight. He held the same note Keanu had given him that first night, folded and a little torn, but still clear. He read it again and again, tracing the handwriting with his finger. "A friend sent you," it said. Those words had changed everything. For the first time in years, James thought about his daughter, not with regret, but with courage. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find her. He asked Maria for help. She had a small office with an old computer. They spent hours searching social media, old contacts, anything that might lead to her. After 2 days, Maria found something. "I think this might be her," she said, pointing to the screen. The name was Claire Dawson, age 26, a teacher in Texas. James stared at the photo, the eyes, the smile. It was her. His daughter. Older, stronger, but still his little girl. He felt his throat tighten. "She made it," he whispered. She really made it. He wanted to message her. His hands hovered over the keyboard, but he froze. "What if she doesn't want to hear from me?" Maria smiled softly. "You'll never know if you don't try." So he typed a message, short and honest. "Hi, Claire, it's your dad." "I don't expect anything. I just wanted to know you're okay." Then he sent it and waited. Miles away in his quiet apartment, Keanu sat on the floor surrounded by scripts and notes. The television was on, but he wasn't watching. He was thinking again about the shelter, about James. He had been donating quietly to shelters all across the city under the name Nightlight. It had started with one man and one bench, but now it was helping hundreds. His assistant, Claire, a different Claire, noticed his pattern. You keep sending money but never putting your name on anything, she said. Keanu smiled. Some lights don't need to be seen to shine. But why this cause? She asked. He looked up, his voice calm. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. He didn't explain more, and she didn't press. She had heard stories about how he lost his family young, about how he used to sit alone in cafes reading old books, about how he'd quietly paid for strangers' surgeries or school fees. But even she didn't know how deep that loneliness once ran in him. James's story had reminded him that kindness wasn't just giving, it was remembering. The next morning, Maria came rushing into the common room holding a phone. "James," she said breathlessly. She replied. He froze. "What? Your daughter?" She replied. His hands shook as he took the phone. The message read, "Dad, I don't know what to say. I thought you were gone. Can we talk?" James sat down slowly, his eyes wide. The shelter went quiet around him. His hands covered his face, and for the first time in years he cried. Not from pain, but from relief. "She still wants to talk to me," he whispered. Over the next few days, James and Claire talked through messages, then calls. Their first phone call was quiet at first, full of pauses and long breaths. "You sound older," she said softly. "Guess I am," he replied, smiling through tears. "Where have you been?" "Lost," he said, "but I'm trying to find my way back." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you're trying." In another corner of the city, Keanu sat by his window again, writing in his journal. His latest entry read, "The world doesn't need more fame. It needs more fathers finding their way home." He didn't know that. At that very moment, the man whose story had inspired him was doing exactly that. A week later, Maria received a call at the shelter. A quiet voice on the other end asked, "Is James Dawson there?" "Yes," Maria said. "Who's calling?" "His daughter," the voice said. Maria smiled. "I think he's been waiting to hear that for a long time." When Claire arrived 2 days later, she stood at the shelter door holding a small suitcase. James walked out slowly, his hands trembling. They just looked at each other for a moment, both frozen in disbelief. Then she ran to him, hugging him tightly. Years of silence melted away in that one embrace. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Me too," she said, crying against his shoulder. "But you're here now." Inside the shelter, everyone watched quietly. Maria wiped her eyes. Even the volunteers stopped working for a moment just to take in the scene. The world outside didn't know this reunion was happening, but for everyone in that room, it was like watching a miracle. Later that evening, after everyone left, James sat outside again under the same streetlight. He whispered to the night, "Thank you, friend. Whoever you are." He didn't know that somewhere far away, Keanu was sitting by his own window watching the same moon. Both men were silent, both at peace, both carrying the same invisible thread that connected them, a thread called kindness. The following morning, the shelter was filled with a rare kind of warmth, the kind that didn't come from heaters or sunlight, but from hearts that had just witnessed something pure. People were still talking softly about the reunion between James and his daughter. Even those who had lost everything began to whisper to each other. "Maybe it's not too late for us either." James and Claire spent the day together. They walked around the shelter, shared a meal with others, and talked for hours about the years they had lost. Claire listened quietly when James told her about the accident, about losing his home, and about how he met a stranger one night who changed his life. "He just sat beside me," James said softly. "Didn't ask for anything. Just listened. No cameras, no pity, just kindness." Claire's eyes softened. "Did you ever find out who he was?" "No," he said. "And maybe that's how it's meant to be." Meanwhile, in another part of Los Angeles, Keanu was on set again, shooting an emotional scene for his new movie. It was a story about a man who had lost everything but rediscovered purpose through helping others. The director called out, "Action!" But when Keanu began to speak his lines, his voice cracked slightly, not because of acting, but because the story reminded him too much of James. After the scene ended, The director said, "That was perfect, Keanu." He just nodded quietly. Inside, he wasn't performing. He was remembering. During lunch break, he sat alone under a tree near the studio lot, eating silently. His assistant, Claire, walked over. "You seem somewhere else again," she said kindly. He smiled faintly. "Just thinking about someone I met once. Someone special?" "Someone strong," he said. "Someone the world stopped seeing but who never stopped trying." That evening, after shooting wrapped, Keanu drove by himself through the city streets. He passed by a mural painted on a wall. A street artist had painted two figures sitting on a bench under the words, "Kindness doesn't need an audience." Keanu stopped the car, staring at it. It felt almost like the universe had left a message for him. He smiled gently, then took a photo of it. Not to post anywhere, but to remember. Back at the shelter, James told Maria he was leaving in a few days. Claire wanted him to come to Texas, to live with her and her husband. Maria hugged him tightly. "You've done so much here, James," she said. "You reminded people that kindness still matters," he smiled. "I didn't do anything big. I just played my guitar." "Sometimes that's all the world needs," she replied. On his last night at the shelter, everyone gathered for a small farewell. They had no money for a party, but they had something better: laughter, stories, and music. James played his last song, one he wrote himself, called "A Seat Beside Me." His voice was shaky, but every word carried emotion. If you see someone sitting alone, don't just walk by, don't just phone. Sit beside. Even for a while, you might just bring back their smile. When he finished, the room fell silent, then filled with applause. Even the youngest volunteer wiped her eyes. Maria whispered, "That was beautiful." James just smiled. "It's not just a song," he said. "It's what happened to me." As everyone went to sleep, he sat one last time by the window, holding the folded note from Keanu. He whispered, "Thank you, friend. I wish I could tell you what you started." But what James didn't know was that the story was already spreading, not through tabloids or headlines, but through hearts. One of the shelter volunteers had shared the story anonymously online, without names or pictures. It was titled, "The Stranger Who Sat Down." Within days, thousands of people read it and began donating to local shelters, saying, "This made me believe again." Keanu came across it one night while scrolling through his phone. He froze when he read the first few lines. The description matched exactly what had happened that night. But the post didn't mention his name, and he smiled at that. "Good," he whispered. "Let it stay nameless." He shared the post quietly with Claire, his assistant, adding only one line, "This is why we should never stop sitting beside someone." 2 weeks later, James and Claire were standing outside a small house in Texas. She turned the key, and he stepped inside, a home again after years of cold streets. On the table sat a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "Someone left this for you at the door," Claire said. James opened it carefully. Inside was a brand new guitar and a note that read, "For the man who still believes in music, keep playing. A friend." James held the note for a long time, his hands trembling. He didn't need to wonder who it was from. He looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you, Keanu." That night, he sat on the porch, playing softly while the wind moved through the trees. His daughter sat beside him, humming along. For the first time in years, there was no noise in his heart, just peace. And miles away in Los Angeles, Keanu looked out his window at the same moon, smiling quietly, knowing he had given someone back their song. The morning sun rose soft and golden over Texas. The air smelled of dew and warm earth. For the first time in years, James woke up in a real bed. Not a bench, not a shelter cot, but a bed in a small room that smelled faintly of coffee and hope. His daughter had made breakfast. The smell of toast drifted through the house. He lay there for a while, listening to the quiet hum of life returning. He smiled. "So this is what home feels like," he whispered. Downstairs, Claire was humming while flipping pancakes. "You're up early," she said when she saw him. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "Too happy to," she laughed softly. "I never thought I'd say this again, but it's good to have you home, Dad." He nodded, his throat tight. It's good to be called that again. Over the next few days, James settled into a gentle rhythm. He helped around the neighborhood, fixing fences, tuning people's old cars, even teaching a few kids to play simple guitar chords. People liked him instantly. They didn't know his past. They only saw the kindness in his eyes and the calmness in his voice. One evening, a small-town festival announced an open mic night for local musicians. Claire encouraged him to join. "You should share your song," she said. "Me? Nah, I'm too old for that," he joked. "You're never too old to remind people what kindness sounds like," she said with a smile. So he agreed. That weekend, the community gathered under strings of lights in the park. Families laughed, kids ran around, and musicians played songs about love, life, and everything in between. When James's name was called, he walked slowly to the small stage with his guitar. His hands trembled a little, but when he looked at his daughter in the crowd, he found his courage. He strummed softly and began to speak. "This song," he said, "is for someone who once sat beside me when the world walked away. I never knew his name, and maybe I never will. But that night, he gave me more than food or money. He gave me a reason to stand again." He paused. "He taught me that kindness isn't something you shout about. It's something you live." Then he played a seat beside me. His voice floated through the warm evening air, quiet, raw, and honest. When he finished, the crowd didn't cheer right away. They just stood there, moved, before breaking into soft applause. Claire was crying. Strangers came forward to shake his hand. Someone asked, "Is that song based on a true story?" James smiled. "Yes. And the best part is, it's still happening. Somewhere, someone is sitting beside someone else right now." Back in Los Angeles, Keanu was finishing a late-night interview for a film promotion. The host, a young reporter, asked him, "You've always been known for your humility. What keeps you grounded in a world that celebrates fame so loudly?" Keanu smiled softly. "People," he said. "Real people. You'd be surprised how much you can learn when you just sit down beside someone without expecting anything." The reporter nodded, curious. "Has someone ever done that for you?" Keanu looked down for a moment, then up again with that calm, thoughtful gaze. "Yes," he said quietly. "And maybe one day I'll tell that story." When the interview ended, he stepped outside into the cool night. The city lights sparkled like stars that had fallen to the ground. He got into his car, but instead of going home, he asked his driver to take a detour. "Where to?" the driver asked. "To the bookstore street," Keanu said. When he arrived, the same bench was still there, the one where it all began. Freshly painted now, but he recognized the spot instantly. He sat down quietly, the street empty around him, the same faint hum of the city in the distance. For a moment, he closed his eyes, remembering James's rough voice, the sound of rain that night, and the look of quiet relief in his eyes. He whispered to himself, "I hope you're safe, my friend." The wind moved softly through the trees, almost like an answer. Then he noticed something on the bench. Someone had carved 3 words into the wood. "Thank you, friend." Keanu smiled, that slow, humble smile that always held 1,000 unspoken emotions. He touched the carving gently, almost like a prayer. He didn't take a photo. He didn't post it. He just sat there, under the quiet streetlight, letting the world slow down around him. After a while, he stood up and looked at the stars. His reflection in the shop window beside him was faint, and for a moment, he thought, maybe that's how kindness should be too. Faint, quiet, and still visible only to those who truly look. He got back into his car and whispered one last thing before the driver pulled away. Some stories don't need to be told. They just need to be lived. Months passed. James's song, "A Seat Beside Me," started spreading online. Someone at the festival had recorded it and shared it without his knowledge. The video went viral, not because of fame or flash, but because it felt human. The comment section was full of people writing things like, "This song made me call my dad. I sat with a stranger today. The world still has good people." The story of the unknown man who once sat beside a homeless musician began to circulate again. Still, no one knew the name. No one knew it was Keanu Reeves, and that was exactly how he wanted it. One night, as James watched the video with his daughter, he smiled and said he'd hate this. He never wanted attention. Claire laughed softly. Maybe. But maybe it's the world's way of saying thank you. He nodded. Maybe it is. Across the city, Keanu saw the same video on his phone while scrolling late at night. He didn't say anything. He just smiled and whispered, "You kept playing." Then he turned off the screen, leaned back, and looked out at the moonlight reflecting on the glass. And in that still moment, two men, a movie star and a man who once lived on the streets, were connected again, silently, through music, memory, and a single act of kindness that neither ever told the world about.